My top three picks for Game Week 32. In at number one is Calafiori for Arsenal at home to Bournemouth this week. Hincapié injured, Lewis Skelly out of form, so Calafiori pretty much nailed on to start. Gives you good defensive upside for the best back line in the Premier League and should cover off a lot of head-to-head opponents who've got Gabriel, Saliba, Raya and the like. The model is underrating him slightly because he hasn't started much recently, but I think we should trust our guts for this week. In at number two is Pascal Gross, away to Burnley this week before going into a double game week next week, which we'll touch on in a few minutes' time. And in at number three is Nottingham Forest Murillo, 6.8 expected points this week according to our model. Pretty low ownership, one again we'll touch on in a few moments' time. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Draft FC podcast, the podcast website and YouTube channel dedicated to all things official draft FPL. My name is Mitch and I'm your host for another game week preview, going over waiver options, hidden gems, and some general Premier League chat ahead of game week 32. I'm recording this on Thursday, the 9th of April, which is the day of the waivers. The waivers will process at 6:30 this evening, so not long to go if you're listening to this before then, because we've got Friday night football before the main game week deadline tomorrow at the same time. So not a lot of time to prepare, but we've also, of course, had an international break. So we've had plenty of time to prepare, but sometimes those are the game weeks which can slip past our minds because you think, oh, I've got ages. I've got a couple of weeks to go before I can do all my waivers. And then you're like, oh, I've got the rest of next week to go. And then suddenly, before you know it, you're driving home from work and the waiver deadline is 30 seconds away. And you missed it. So don't miss it. It's an important game week, not least because of what's going to happen in the next game week, which we'll touch on very shortly. We got an announcement of the confirmation of where the doubles and blanks would be, thanks to the FA Cup fixtures, because all of the FA Cup quarterfinals were completed at the weekend. So we know where we stand with regards to those cup competitions. Now, I didn't leave you totally in the lurch over the international break. There were a few bonus pods which may have already caught your attention. I'll be honest with you, a couple of them are going to be of absolutely no use to you in terms of planning for your upcoming moves and plotting domination in your draft leagues, but they are there to kill a bit of time and pique any interest for those of you that are really into your draft FPL. The first one was just looking at some general data on waiver trends and whether doing more actually leads to more success, which it probably does. Secondly, we had a bit of a fun look at whether there's any trends we could find from patterns with what you call your FPL draft team. And then in at number three, a long overdue episode, having a little look at the Draft FC Invitational League that I put together way back in the summer, which is going really well, top 1% in the world for 8-team leagues. And setting the scene there, ready to revisit them again, probably in postseason to see how it all shakes out. So yeah, if you're feeling like you need a little bit more Draft FC content, there is something there for you to have a look at after this one. But in the interest of time, let's get straight into it. So most of you will no doubt be aware, if you are into FPL and take this all seriously, that we got some fixture news and we got confirmation that certain teams will have their Game Week 34 fixtures brought forward into the back end of Game Week 33. So although I haven't put it on this slide, the important caveat to remember here is that all of these teams that are going to double in Game Week 33 are going to blank. They will have no match in Game Week 34. So we do have to bear that in mind. Of course, for those of you in head-to-head leagues, you've got to have a look at who your matchups are on those weeks. If you've got a really important matchup in Game Week 34, then you do not want to leave yourself overexposed for that one. Say, because of the likes of City, Man United and Chelsea all blanking in Game Week 34, there is a good chance that could affect some of you a lot heavier than others. But the teams in question, so we've got Bournemouth, who have possibly got, aside from Leeds, who will come to in a minute, probably one of the biggest swings between this week and next. So they're away to Arsenal this game week. So ordinarily, we would not be going anywhere near Bournemouth assets, and obviously with an away trip to St James's Park in Game 33, even more reason to dodge them and move away from some of their more casual midfielders and defensive pickups. But their double now has a home game against Leeds added into it. So Game 33 is Newcastle away Leeds at home, which is all right. Brighton, slightly more balanced. They go away to Burnley this week. So again, we may have already been looking at Brighton assets anyway because of that fixture. And then in game week 33, they go away to Spurs and have Chelsea at home, which at a glance, if you were looking at this, if you were in a time machine and you were looking at this from a few years ago, you'd think absolutely no point going anywhere near that. But of course, Spurs are definitely a fixture to target, even with their subsequent managerial change, and Chelsea not in a good spot themselves either. So Brighton are another team I don't mind. Burnley, they've got Brighton at home this week and then away to Forest, home to City. It's not the worst set of fixtures, but it is Burnley. And as much as they've been doing a bit better in recent months, I think they are still going to struggle over those 3 games. Then we got Chelsea themselves in the bad spot. They've probably got the worst little trio of fixtures out of all of them. Man City at home, Man United at home, Brighton away. You'd be hard pushed to say that they get a win in any 3 of those games at the moment, given their form. Then we come to Leeds, who I say they're probably the biggest swing between this week and next. They go away to Old Trafford, to obviously one of the informed teams in the Premier League at the moment, at Man United. But their double game week, game 33, is Wolves at home, Bournemouth away, which I think is the best of the lot when it comes to just those double game week fixtures. Then we have Manchester City, more of a mixed bag, Chelsea away, and then their double is Arsenal at home, which is going to be a huge game in the title race. And then slightly more relaxed affair away at Burnley. But let's say there's going to be less City assets, I think, going to be floating around in the waiver pile this week and next anyway. But they are the teams. I think there are definitely some teams worth targeting there, and we'll steer some of the picks in the coming slides. Before we do that, a quick look at the sort of top of the pops in terms of what our model is predicting for game week 32 in terms of expected points. No surprises, because these two have been up there for most weeks lately. Szoboszlai and Bruno Fernandes lead the way. The main surprise is probably Van Hecke, who is a very popular topical conversation because of those fixtures that we just discussed. Now, I've slightly widened my criteria this week, so we're looking at top 500 10-team leagues in terms of the roster percentages. But even with that lens, Van Hecke has around 95% ownership. So he's not going to be there for the majority of you in engaged leagues. But if he is an absolute no-brainer. I haven't included him in the slides because his ownership is so high. But if you're in a smaller league, or if you are in one of those sort of 1 in 20 leagues where he is floating around, then a definite pickup, number 1 on the waiver list this week. Let's get into the main picks, starting with the defenders. And that first one in my tips, Calafiori for Arsenal. 70% ownership is fairly modest, but he's going to be there for enough of you. Our model is kind of underrepresenting his chances of starting because of the fact that he hasn't really started a huge number of Premier League games recently. But the context is key here. And I think given the injuries and given the fact that Lewis Skelly is not really on the board when it comes to starting Premier League games at the moment, I think he's pretty much nailed on to start, unless we get some really convincing injury news about Hincapié from Arteta in the press conference, but I think there's pretty low chance we get any clear advice on that one. So should start. It's a home game against Bournemouth, which on paper should be all right for them. He's obviously got the potential for the clean sheet there and the defensive upside. Also has the attacking upside too. Gets forward, he creates, and I'd say he's part of the best defensive unit in the league. So yeah, if he's there, he's an easy one to pencil in on your waiver list. Next is Diouf for West Ham. We'll come across a few West Ham players on this episode because they have got a nice looking home game against Wolves. His ownership just over halfway at 57%. The assist king for West Ham, I think he's up to, I haven't actually looked, it's about 7 for the season now. You can double check that yourself. But yeah, very nice fixture. He's probably one of the safest ways into the West Ham defence this week because the rest have all got a few niggly injury flags on them. So yeah, high upside, low floor as always. And a bit of a shame we aren't able to pick him up with a view on the double game week next week, because if West Ham had beaten Leeds in their FA Cup quarter-final, we could have had quite a nice double up for West Ham next week too. But still a decent option if you're just looking short-term for this week. I'll cover his teammate Wan-Bissaka as well, 19% owned, so far more availability there. He has got a slight injury doubt attached to him, so we will have to await news on him. But, we know he can do well for the defensive contributions, and it's a good opportunity for a clean sheet anyway. Next on the list is Milenkovic, who's got modest ownership, just under 50%. Now, our model really likes Nottingham Forest at home to Villa this week, which is one of the reasons why Murillo was on the top of the pops list at the beginning. Milenkovic isn't on there because he's just slightly underfavored by our model, and his ownership is also much higher. In terms of a roster percentage expected points mismatch, Murillo is one of the standouts this week. So the model's predicting him to get 6 to 7 points, which is obviously a very good week, and he will be there for the vast majority of you. I think the Forest assets will generally be overlooked because a lot of managers will be looking at the more exciting prospects of those that have got double game weeks next week, which of course Forest are not on that list. But what I will say, and of course you may have noticed yourself, is Forest have one of the, if not the best fixture in game week 33, albeit a single game week. They are at home to Burnley. So you've got Villa at home, Burnley at home in subsequent weeks. And I think there is not a 0% chance that some of these Forest assets outperform a lot of the guys from teams who have got a double next week. Speaking of teams that have a double next week, is Kadioglu for Brighton, around a third ownership. Brighton away at Burnley this week. They are heavy favourites in that game. He's expected 6.4 points according to our model. And of course, crucially, has that double next week. I think he's pretty much nailed on, unless he gets an injury. He's nailed on to start all of those games. He's underperforming his expected goal involvements per 90 by about half so far this season. I think the tally expects him to have gotten about 4 returns this season. He's on about 2. So could argue he's due something there as well. Ampadu for Leeds, ownership just 34%. Now, for a double game week, this appeals to my boring conservative soul at its core. Is very, very high floor. His defensive contribution numbers over the last month or two have been phenomenal. Over the last 5 fixtures, he's got 75 and averaging just shy of 5 FPL points per game week in that time as well. So the kind of low energy pick that could easily net you 8, 9, even 10 FPL points in the double by doing absolutely nothing. Next, at the complete opposite, the complete antithesis to the Ampadu pick, is Jeremy Doku for Manchester City. Now, this is probably a particular tip aimed at those of you in classic scoring leagues who are looking to take a few big swings over the coming game weeks if you're chasing a little bit. Here we have the quintessential feast or famine player. Not even nailed to start, just to add to the spice, but if you glance at the sort of recent Premier League form, it won't really do him justice because he has started 3 massive cup games in a row. Because since City last played a Premier League game, they've had Real Madrid, Arsenal and Liverpool all in the cup games, and he started all 3 of those. 8 Premier League returns over the season so far. They've all come from just 5 individual fixtures, so he's more likely to get you a 1-pointer than he is to haul. But if he does start and if he does go off, he will look like an absolute genius. Next is my old mate Pascal Gross, who, it's difficult to really turn our heads away from him. And I say, with this fixture followed by the double, I'm sure lots and lots of you will also be looking at him as well. I think he is probably, in terms of a balanced player who can do a bit of everything, he's probably going to start all 3 of those games. He is, I think, the standout midfield pickup. And when I say the standout, I'm talking about someone who is fairly low owned, who is likely to be available to you. There are, of course, other midfielders I would more likely want, but their ownership is 100% and they're firmly locked up. In terms of actual attainable players, I think Pascal Gross is up there. For this week, we've got him pegged at 6.3 expected points, say under 40% ownership in top 510 team leagues, and very likely lower than that in smaller leagues. So I would get him in now before the double game week hype really kicks off next week. Then we come to Rodri for City, who is a player that's in and out of the pod. Chelsea away, I say, is not the worst fixture on paper, and then they've got that double game week. He is nailed on to start. 4.2 expected points this game week isn't bad because of the defensive contributions he can get, and he is the kind of player who accumulates points quietly, but then can explode in the double game week because he's due more attacking returns before we reach game week 38. And I think if you are picking him up this week, you 100% roll with him next week too. Aronson is the slightly more exciting way into that Leeds midfield, given the injury to Statch that we'll mention later on. I think that just even increases his odds of playing all those games. Hasn't done a huge amount in recent game weeks, but still a player I like. Matheus Fernandes, another one, again, more short term for that Wolves fixture at home. 5.7 expected points this week is pretty good as well, but one that you may be looking to flip again next week. And then Scott, reasonably high ownership. Say away at Arsenal this week, probably we were going to be looking to drop Scott, but he's similar. He's in the same bracket as Ampadu. He's become one of the more reliable, steady, consistent midfielders in the entire game. He has got 12 double-digit DEFCON returns in the last 14 game weeks. So yeah, one of the most consistent from that perspective. Could obviously chip in with attacking returns too. So mainly flagging him for those in smaller leagues who might want to pick him up, but also those in larger leagues who are not sure whether to stick or twist. I would certainly stick, because even though the fixture's bad on paper, he could still easily walk away with 4 or 5 points. Obviously, at this stage in the season, the forward options are never particularly excited. We've got Fleming still on there, very high ownership. So it's mainly just flagging for those that do have him to keep hold of him. I think he becomes slightly more attractive with the double. Probably going to be advocating to drop him for that blank. There's some better options we can pull out of the pile. Teammate Foster is also starting reliably now, so I think he's another worthwhile option for the double as well. And then the Metra is the least exciting one there and a bit more risky. We have seen him start a few games alongside Calvert-Lewin in recent weeks. Over the next 2 game weeks where they've got the 3 fixtures, the chances of him starting all 3, I think, are probably slim to none, unless we get news that Calvert-Lewin is going to miss 1 or 2 games with injury. Then, of course, he becomes the natural next man up. But I think the odds are he'll probably play half the minutes. But he's there for those of you that are really desperate for playing forward. Into some hidden gems, which we'll try and rattle through on the quicker side. In at number 1, with the grand tally of 0% roster owned in top 500 10-team leagues, is Brighton defender Buscagli. Dunk is suspended for a couple of games, having picked up 10 yellow cards, which means Buscagli should be nailed for this week in at least one of the double game week fixtures. Maybe one you find not worth the hassle, knowing that there's a high chance Dunk comes back in for that second fixture in the double game week. But for those of you in bigger leagues, he could be a very easily overlooked option. Next is teammate Hinchelwood, slightly higher owned at 2%, 6 Premier League starts in a row with 3 returns in that time. Very return dependent, as he gets nowhere near the defensive contributions, but a safe pair of hands for those of you in larger leagues looking to fill up for the double. Next is Manchester City defender Kushinov, 3% owned, starting more games lately, including the recent FA Cup quarter-final. Diaz is a slight injury doubt, which opens the door for him to start again. And if we do get confirmation of that he could be out for a week or 2, then Kusanov could start all 3 games over this week and the next one. For West Ham, we have got Disasi at the back, just 4% owned, expected points of 4.2 this game week at home to Wolves. Again, similar to Murillo, one of our biggest mismatches in terms of expected points and his roster percentage. West Ham defenders are obviously going to be popular, so do not overlook Disasi, because apart from Diouf, who's going to be harder to come by, he is probably the safest way into that back line at the moment. Next to Leeds, and another player that you don't want to overlook if you're looking for coverage there, is defender Biol, 5% owned. Obviously benefiting from Leeds picking up a couple of 0-0 draws in recent weeks, and given Rodon's injury doubt, even more nailed to continue his place in the team. Now, a rare forward option, and one that I touched on a couple of game weeks back, is Chris Wood, 9% owned, back in the Nottingham Forest squad for their Europa League game today. Yet to see whether he'll start. I doubt he will start. I imagine we will see him come off the bench, but means we can be hopeful potentially to see him off the bench in the Premier League this week, with a view to him then getting back into some more regular minutes and hopefully starts. He's a player that I picked up a few game weeks back to hold on the bench, because I thought I'd rather hold Wood for a couple of weeks than go with some of the third forward options that were floating around in my waiver pile. So I'm quite pleased to see that news, and I'll continue to hold him for another week or 2. And then finally, just bending the truth slightly when it comes to hidden gem territory, 10.7% owned, the DEFCON king Mats Viffer for Brighton. He got a rare miss last game week. He played the full 90 and didn't actually get to the threshold, but that does not put me off at all. You all know the deal with him, and he's another one where the floor for the double could be one of the highest out there. If you're finding this stuff useful, click the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and do comment any questions for this game week and next below, and I will get back to you. Those of you listening, do make sure you're following on whichever podcast platform you are listening on. And for those of you that have never been to draftfc.co.uk before, all those that sign up who have never signed up before will get a 1-month free trial, so you can check out everything we've got on offer there with absolutely no upfront costs. On to hold, drop, or trade. Not a huge number to go through here. I didn't want to over-egg this. So Statch is obviously a drop, unfortunately. We haven't got firm news on his injury, but just from the optics of it, did not look too clever. So I expect he will miss at a minimum a few weeks, which obviously rules him out of this week and the double game week, which is frustrating. And I think given how few game weeks there are left now, a player that's potentially going to miss half of the remaining games is not someone, unfortunately, that we can keep hold of, despite how big a fan I am of him. Phil Foden is another one. His roster percentage is slowly dropping anyway, but for those of you who have been clinging on, does not look good for his chances of playing. Bruno Guimaraes, there's been lots of talk about Bruno Guimaraes this week. It doesn't seem as though he's going to be straight back into the 11, but we don't have any firm news. Obviously, we're coming off an international break, so he's had a bit of time to recover, but it does sound like he could still be one more week away. So certainly don't drop him, but may also want to reconsider if you were planning on picking up, not least because you've now got a whole wealth of options who've got the double game week next week too. And then finally, some chat about trading away Saka and the Arsenal assets. Now, the fact that Arsenal missed out on the on progressing in the FA Cup, aside from my Spurs allegiance, I actually thought was quite a good thing for the Arsenal assets, because rather than now facing that cliff edge where we're going to, be able to play them this week and then have the double and then they have the blank, players like Saka now we've hopefully got for more consistent week to week minutes and a couple fewer cup games in there too means the rotation risk is slightly lower as well. So I wouldn't be looking to offload Saka just yet. Quick look at Waiver Watch, which I think we'll see massive swings this week given the fixture change. Minter was high up there, who's, say, a very plausible asset going into these upcoming game weeks, just not doing a lot for me. Bassi, Livramento, Ramsdale were high up on those being brought in before the international break. Those leaving, Jimenez, James, Chalobah and Mane, all fairly reasonable, and then a lot of City players on the list as well. In terms of key injuries and suspensions, we've already touched on a few of these. Statch, have no idea when he's due to be back. Rodon also picked up an ankle injury, but doesn't sound like it's quite as bad. But again, maybe just annoyingly long enough to keep him out of this week and the double. Dunk has a 2-match suspension for his 10 yellows, which is why we were talking about Scagli. Enzo Fernandez has been given sort of a club suspension for this upcoming Premier League game. So we expect to see him back in game 33. And we also got news that Alisson, Liverpool goalkeeper, has picked up a hamstring injury, which given the time frame could be close to ruling him out for the rest of the season. I think he's probably going to miss 6 to 8 weeks, which is about as long as we've got left. So those of you that have got Alisson, I would go looking for another pickup, and there probably are some decent options out there, particularly Darlow for Leeds, whose ownership is still pretty low. Game 32 lineups first pass have been done. Waiting for some team news and press conferences to occur later this afternoon. I should have some time to go through and tweak these as I am trying my best to put my feet up and watch and take in as much of the golf as I can. But that is it for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to go and pencil in some of those moves and do have a look at the fixtures for next week if that has passed you by. If you enjoyed the content, then do give us a follow or subscribe if you're listening or watching. Give us a thumbs up if you're on YouTube. And as I said, you can also comment below any questions if they're short term or slightly longer term if you're thinking about those moves for the double game week next week. Any that are particularly useful, or if we get any common themes come up in the questions, then I will bring them into the next pod and put them in the Q&A section. Because of the international break and the fact that I was messing around with those other pods, I haven't done a Q&A section for this one, but no plans to retire that. So if we get some questions that are sort of worthy for that next week, then I'll put them front and center and answer them as part of the content. I'll say again, those of you that haven't been to draftsfc.co.uk before, you can get a 1-month free trial if you haven't signed up before. You get all sorts in there, league analytics, you get the squad planner, all the roster data that I refer to, our expected points model. Our predicted lineups are also slightly more beefed up than what you can see in the public-facing sites. Obviously, anyone can see our predicted lineups, but if you're in the app, then it overlays all of your league data on there too, so you can quickly see at a glance who's free, what their expected points are, rather than skimming the tables, if that's an easier way for you to look. You also have a look at your global rank, which I referred to in one of the recent pods as well, to see where your league ranks in the world for your league size. And so you can see just how competitive, just how good you are as a league, which can be quite nice at this time of year to see how you are shaping up. The other thing, which will be on us before we know it, come the end of the season, we've also got our time capsule feature, which will save all of your league data in the app to refer back to in years to come, which those of you that have played for a few years will know the moment the game ticks over in the summer, all of the league data from the year before is gone. I know some of you would sort of save it manually and have spreadsheets and things, but this is quite a nice, easy way with just a click of a button, basically, to make sure all of that is kept for you to look back on. So yeah, plenty of reasons to sign up. And of course, those of you, if you've signed up before, you're more than welcome to come back. You just won't get the 1-month free trial. Oh, and of course, you get draft live notifications, which is my favorite ongoing thing. Obviously, you've missed it for the last few weeks because we've had the international break, but yeah, you will be able to have your league updates ping through to your phone. So every time a goal goes in, an assist for any player owned in your league, you can also tweak that depending on the level of notifications that you want, and instantly know which manager in your league, or which, or if you're in a head-to-head league, if your opponent is benefiting from any of those goals and assists and points which are coming in. So we'll leave things there because by the time I get this edited and sent out, it will just be a few hours to go before the deadline. Best of luck for the upcoming game week and your matchups. And until next time, stay sure.